welcome to Trusty Chords, the podcast which aims to celebrate music and those that create it. For 15 years now, Canadian outfit PUP have been defying the concept that their name stands for a pathetic use of potential and have been proving all and sundry wrong as they travel around the world with their unique blend of alt rock and punk. Formed in 2010 as Topanga, PUP issued their self-titled album in 2013 with The Dream Is Over following just a few years later. Records like Morbid Stuff and the Unravelling of PUPTheBand have since cemented their status as consistent, reliable purveyors of stellar music, and their live shows have cemented them as favourites amongst lovers of the genre. This year, May 2nd to be precise, PUP released their fifth album, Who Will Look After the Dogs. As I usually say, it's a brilliant record and it's one that is undeniably worth your time. Things get even better too, because in just a few short months they'll be back visiting Australia as part of their global tour plans. This week, I was lucky enough to be joined by PUP guitarist Steve Sladkowski, who was kind enough to talk about music for far longer than we were supposed to. In honour of his appearance, we're also briefly rebranding the podcast in honour of PUP's 2022 song, 4 Chords. Not really, but hey, I'd be remiss not to take the opportunity. Anyway, I strongly urge you to check out PUP's Who Will Look After the Dogs, and once you're done doing that, have a listen to our chat, and I'll see you at the end of the episode for some general housekeeping. Steve Sladkowski, thank you very much for joining this episode of Trusty Chords.
Thanks for having me.
So, for those who don't recognise your name, could you give me a quick few words on who you are and why we're chatting today?
Sure. I am the guitarist in the Canadian punk band PUP. We are, I suppose, here because there's an upcoming Australian and New Zealand tour. And a new record coming out on May 2nd, just very soon from this date of record.
Yes, and I think by the time I listen to this, it'll probably be May 2nd by the time this comes out. So congratulations on the new record, Steve.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
So I should also say at the start, this podcast is called Trusty Chords. I originally named it after a song by Hot Water Music, but I guess in honor of your appearance, I should probably call it 4 Chords just for today, or we can add 5 chords and diminishing returns to the mix if we would like.
Yes.
But I guess what I'd like to do with the start of these podcasts is actually go back in time to where a love of music first formed. So for you, do you have a recollection of your earliest memory of when music first resonated with you?
Yeah, I would say... I'm a product of public school education, and I have a family of public school teachers. There's a public school teacher in every generation of my family, basically, even dating back to before they came to Canada. And I went to a public school in Toronto, in the west end of Toronto, and it had a robust music program. So, my grandmother would kind of sing in the house or whatever, but and my parents had records, but like the first real kind of influence I had with an instrument and kind of like getting to connect with music through actually like playing it was I was very, very young in I think in Toronto, it was in what we would call grade 4, the 4th grade. And I started playing cello.
Right.
And I played cello until I was 18. So that was about 8 or 9 years. I was like right around kind of 10, maybe a little bit younger when I started. And kind of, obviously it was not as cool as the guitar, but it gave me kind of a lot of a long runway. Once I started playing the guitar, I was a little bit more dexterous but yeah, it was just like the kind of first like playing music in groups and learning about music and just sort of finding myself like very, very interested in it. And then other than that, I think just like some of my earliest kind of concerts, like I loved The Who and I loved Buddy Holly, and my mom took me to see both of those musicals. Like I saw Tommy, one of the original like productions of Tommy, the musical, like the Broadway musical. And then I saw the Buddy Holly story. So there are all this kind of like fundamental. This is around the same age. I was probably like 10 or 11. Like um, and yeah, from there, kind of just like whatever. Once I picked up the guitar, that was I picked up the guitar in 2000. And I got to play. The first guitar I ever played was my maternal grandfather's, like acoustic guitar that my mom still had. It was like an old Sears and Roebuck catalog like guitar.
Yeah.
And I still have it. My mom, I gave it back to my mom because I have a few more uh professional grade instruments now. but but yeah, so I learned on my grandfather's guitar. And yeah, just sort of like it was kind of off to the races from there.
Right. So what I'm hearing is that you sort of got this this background of listening to some of like the classic artists, like you mentioned the Who, Buddy Holly, and everything like that. And all the while, I'm assuming that you're thinking, why isn't there more cello in these bands? But when you pick up the guitar, obviously, that's when you sort of, I guess, start on that path to where we get to today. So I guess PUP started in 2010, I think it was. But I guess did you have any bands before that? You strike me as a bit of a high school band guy. Is that true?
Oh, 100%. Yes, 100%. So, yeah, Zach, the drummer in PUP, and Nestor, the bass player, and I all went to high school together.
Mhm.
So we had just like a truly uh, profoundly embarrassing uh, like ska punk band, because this was right around the time that like uh, Rancid and Choking Victim and some of the like Dookie, that kind of classic heyday of like ska punk, sort of third wave ska,
Yeah.
and pop punk really kind of um, coming to the forefront, I think, of like popular music. Um, so yeah, we go way back. We knew each other, and I always loved just like playing guitar at home too. So it was kind of I just would play as much as I could.
Right. And I would be remiss not to ask, what was the name of that ska punk band?
It was called Fresh Produce,
Okay.
uh, and it was based off of a rug at a supermarket that said Fresh Produce. Like either someone had stolen it or it had ended up in like Nestor's parents' garage somehow. It's very unclear how it got there. Um, and it just said Fresh Produce, and so the rug was in the room, or in the garage, literally in the garage that the band was started in.
Right.
Uh, and so that's what the name, it's really just another vote of confidence in the belief that all band names are bad, or like the vast majority of band names are bad.
Well, that's totally fair. I mean, I was going to use that as a nice little segue to say, because when PUP first began, obviously PUP wasn't the original name. The original name coming from Boy Meets World. So I guess, when everything sort of first started in those early days, what was the plan for PUP? Had the band been formed with any huge plans of fame and fortune? Were you guys just like wanting to have a little bit of fun?
Yeah, it definitely is the latter. I think we were all would have been about, I guess, 22. I want to say 21, 22, kind of right around that time. And I had been playing, like I did study music at university. And I had played in some wedding bands and some like folk house gigs, kind of playing with singers. I'd done a little bit of session work. So I was sort of like interested in trying to figure out how to do this as sort of a full-time thing. But at that point, it's a wing and a prayer and not much else. So getting invited, kind of, I got an email from Zach, and they were like, the sort of like, hey, let's see, everyone is committed to the band. That was kind of the main thing for the four of us. It's like, if we're going to work on these songs, we want it to be committed, so that if we are going to play some gigs and get paid in drink tickets or whatever, at least the four of us are all kind of on the same page about that. So that's what we did, and it connected with people, and we ended up changing the name sort of once we made the record, because I think we were all sort of surprised by the record and how much like heavier it was. Because when the band first started, there was acoustic guitars and we had auditioned like piano players. There were like horns. Uh, you know, it was kind of, even though some of the songs had their origin in Topanga, uh, it it was very clear to us that it was kind of a different thing once we kind of heard it back on the speakers in the recording studio.
Of course, yeah.
So that was part of what precipitated the name change.
Right.
And yeah, from there, it was just about, oh, okay, this small college town that I lived in, it was about an hour away, and I knew the one person who put on like rock shows there, and I messaged him and was like, hey, will you be happy to come play in that town, and kind of similar thing to, we had some friends in Montreal, which is like 5-ish hours from Toronto. That was about as far as we would get in the early days. And then slowly had to kind of figure out, okay, do we need to go to the United States? Like that for a Canadian band tends to be the most difficult thing. And so we had to kind of wrestle with all of that. But yeah, I don't know that there was like a grand plan other than, okay, let's have some fun and, drink a beer and play some shows and write some songs and hang out.
Yeah. I mean, speaking as someone who is in a band as well, obviously not to your level, but those drink tickets, those are that's what you're aiming for. That is the pinnacle
Yeah,
when
right.
you're a young band.
Like when it's more than two, you feel like you're like that. You're like that. That's what it means to be rich. Like if you
Exactly,
have
living
more than
like
two
kings.
drink tickets. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I first heard of you guys when the first album came out because I was huge into the Side One Dummy catalog at the time, and I remember seeing
Sure.
the album just show up on their website, and I thought I don't know what the hell this is, but the album artwork is it just looks fascinating. It really drew me in, and I mean there's great albums on that catalog, and your debut just felt like a really fitting record. But I guess to me it feels like it's the second album where things started to sort of take off a bit on a more international scale. But I guess do you agree, or was there a moment where you sort of feel like, hey, all this effort is sort of paying off? Like it's sort of we're seeing some returns on our investment, so to speak.
Yeah, I think everything was quite gradual. So like some unexpected stuff has always happened with each record. Um Probably the first kind of sign of that was actually with the first record. Uh there was a lot of like interest in the UK. And so that was something that we kind of didn't expect. We thought, okay, it'll come out. Obviously, at that point, we had been reviewed a little bit in the Canadian press. We had like some US work permits. We'd been, driven down to New York and played a couple of places, like played, over the border in like Buffalo, New York, which is close to Toronto. Um, but when it connected in the UK and we got invited to come over there for a tour and um, played a few shows in Europe, all of a sudden it was like, oh, whoa, this is real now, like, and I actually said this to a friend last night. Uh, just like, that's one of the things that still to me feels like amazing is just like the fact that we get to go on on an airplane to go somewhere to play music and get paid to do that. Like that still feels almost like a fever dream. But I think, yeah, we would have made our first trip, to Australia, like, I think while the first record was still out. Maybe the second record was out, but it's hard to recall. I think it was before that. But I guess like, very gradually at that point still, I think we could afford to pay ourselves maybe, like I still had a day job. I guess that's the thing where, or not a day job, but like I was working, whatever, like selling eyeglasses or working a catering job, just like doing whatever kind of work. I taught guitar for a little bit because I had done that in the past. So once, I think to your point, the second record kind of taking off like that was the first time I didn't have to come home from tour and like go back to whatever job.
Mhm.
So yeah, I would say probably 2016 or 17.
Yeah, right.
That's kind of yeah.
And I guess just in the interest of time, I should sort of jump ahead a little bit and actually touch on this new album because I guess to put it simply, it's a little bit amazing. It's, and obviously it comes 3 years after the last record, as you guys have a history of doing, 3 years between records. But I guess I'd love to know, what does this album, and I guess for those listening, the album is Who Will Look After the Dogs. What does this album say about who PUP are in 2025?
I would say, something that we wanted to try and marry, so to speak, was the approach we had on the first record, which, was done very quickly, very raw, very much live off the floor, not a ton. There are some overdubs here and there for different tones on the guitars, and, for vocal takes, but a lot of what you're hearing on that record is like the four of us, one take in a room. Um, and we knew that we weren't going to be making the record like that, but we wanted to kind of recapture that approach to the songwriting while kind of marrying the little bit of like experimenting and kind of stretching out that we did on the last record. I think the last record was very much like a time and place pandemic record. So we were much more to maintain our own sanity. I think we're like, yeah, let's throw a saxophone on there. Let's use a synthesizer. Who cares if it can sound like it's a rock band playing the song? Let's just go with these songs that we've written and figure out kind of how to play them after the fact.
Right. Okay.
Which was the first time we had ever done that as a band. And so for this record, it was like, all right, let's keep that open-mindedness and that kind of spirit of experimentation, but let's try and do it in a way that at least when we're writing the songs, we feel like we can play all of them as though we were making the first record, which is four guys in a room playing the songs. And part of that was because working with John Congleton, who's amazing, 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 and is such an integral part to this record, as any producer is to any record.
Producer,
but
truly.
He really is. He really is. I think John liked to make records quickly, right? Like, so in the past, we had done our records kind of between 4 to 6 weeks, which is indulgent and allows us to take our time and like, I think candidly, like maybe leads us to a little bit of overthinking, especially in kind of the Morbid stuff and Unravelling, because we were, at that point we were good enough in a studio that we could tinker, which I don't think is a problem, but it was interesting to present a new challenge to ourselves with only 3 weeks with John. So we essentially halved the time that we had to make an entire record. And putting that like parameter or putting that sort of like limitation on the process, just like really, I think made us uncomfortable in a great way. So we took all this time to prepare and tried to leave certain parts of the songs open-ended so that if John wanted to make a change or suggested a change, we were kind of elastic enough with the arrangements to quickly make that change. And so a song like Hunger for Death went through that kind of process. And a song like Shut Up totally changed. The song that ends the record totally changed with John in the studio from how we had been playing it. And that just like that forced a level of discomfort that we, I think, responded to and that I hear on the record in a way that I really like. There's this kind of sense of danger is maybe too strong of a word, but there is like, it's like there's some excitement. We're kind of like playing on the edge a little more than I think we were used to. And I think that really that was just like such a cool way to go in there and make the record.
Right. Yeah. Oh, actually, I mean, just as you were sort of saying, like, you have these parameters set down, and like, John, what sort of gives you 3 weeks. Like, this is, I guess, a small bit of promo on my end, but I mean, I've recently actually written a book, which is actually coming out the day before the new album for you guys,
There you
and
go.
similar sort of situation where it's like, okay, you've got this deadline, and you just sort of think, all right, well, if I was to have it open ended and have so much more time, it would be a totally different product to what it is in the end if you have this sort of finite amount of time set aside for you. And I mean, it's also really good to hear that that worked for you guys, because I guess for some artists it can create an issue where they overthink things, or they think, oh, we haven't got enough time. But it's really good to actually hear it turns out being a little bit almost full circle for you guys, in that it feels like the first records and stuff like that. Like, I can only imagine
Yeah.
that for all of you guys that was a very, I guess, what's the word I'm trying to find, fruitful sort of endeavor in the end.
Yes, I think so. And I think part of making records is that you're never 100% satisfied. That's why you keep making them, right? Like it is a compulsion in a lot of ways, but it is a kind of naturally imperfect um, pursuit.
Hmm.
And that is kind of I think we are at a level of maturity, both as sort of a band, like a creative unit, and as just like grown ass adults that like uh it's a little bit easier to allow yourself that kind of short timeline and that constrained limitation, because it just like it's interesting and uncomfortable. I think if we had tried to do this with John, maybe even the last record, but certainly the first three records, we probably would have fallen apart.
Yeah.
Like I think it's one of those sort of like, I'm a believer that you make records as snapshots of both who the band is and kind of, wherever you were as a person. um I hear things in my life in all of these records whenever I have to go back and like practice music for tour that were going on. Like it's like it can be overwhelming at times.
Yeah.
But that's, we that's a maturity level that we have, I think, to make that record the way we did with John.
Of course. Plus, then I could also imagine if you're going back and sort of viewing these albums as snapshots as well, there will be times when you're just sort of like, man, I should have done a different riff here or a different chord here, but that's much the same as
Uh,
looking at a snapshot. And you're like, why did I wear that shirt? Why is my hair like that? It's just it's part of your history now, isn't it?
yeah, it totally is. And I think it's made me more forgiving in approaching music by artists that I like.
Hmm.
Like it's so much more interesting. I think a band like that, for me, and I guess we can, if you want to transition into the next part of the interview that you mentioned, but like a band like that for me is like Wilco. Like I think before I had started making records like pretty, consistently, as you said, like we make them on a 3-year clip, which is pretty intense. Um, I think a band like Wilco for me would have been like, oh, okay, well, I love Yankee Hotel Foxtrot and A Ghost is Born and Sky Blue Sky and Summer Teeth and those kind of 4 kind of classic Wilco records. One with Nels Cline, a few before Nels Cline was in the band. But it's so much more interesting to me to kind of hear how a kind of stable band of just like the same working people, because they've been the same band for quite a long time, how that evolves and that journey that they're on as like a unit. I find so much more interesting now than I think I ever did when, I was very, very concerned with making my taste in music like a huge part of my personality. I think taste is an important thing. Um, and I think it runs counter to how algorithms kind of want us to consume media. But I also think, you know, there's a time and a place for being a hater and a snob. Uh, so yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying I'm appreciating going on the journey with artists that I love.
Of course. Actually, I will jump into that last section of the podcast in a sec, but it's nice to have Wilco as a bit of a foothold there. But I guess I should say as well,
Yeah.
you guys are coming back to Australia very soon. So we mentioned before the first time you came, I checked it. It was in early 2015, so a year before the second album. So we got to see you when you were quite young pups, so to speak. But
Yeah.
I guess what is it that keeps you guys coming back to Australia? Obviously, an easy answer would be the fans and the constant support. But is there anything that sort of makes you guys just feel, you know what, Australia is a good market for us? Like you mentioned the UK before having all this early support, but
Yeah.
what is it about Australia that sort of resonates?
Well, it's a pretty short flight. Uh, I'm kidding. I'm kidding, obviously, but
Oh, I
no,
know.
it's
Don't worry.
yeah. No, I think all there's just something. I, I was having this conversation actually with the same friend I was talking to last night. I was out at a baseball game, um, and there's something that feels very familiar about Australia. And I don't know if that is, we have the same sort of colonial horrors of the Commonwealth, or whatever the case may be.
Trauma bonding there.
It's like sometimes like the joke, yeah, exactly right. Sometimes the joke, I'm like, oh, this is like hot Canada,
Yeah.
right? Or like, so I think there is sort of you know, I, I kind of, it feels like there's an innate understanding of the type of crazy that Australians are. Uh, the same way that like Canadians are, where I'm like, really? Like we're in Brisbane and it's 30 degrees and it just is 30 degrees here most of the time. Like, but then I'm like, it was 5 degrees Celsius today and it's April. Like, it's almost my birthday, and usually my birthday is quite warm. So yeah, you could easily say, how do you live in the cold, right? And I live in like a temperate part of Canada. Like I have a friend who lives out in the Rocky Mountains, and there's still snow on the ground and it's frozen. And anytime he takes his dog out for a walk, he has to bundle up. Um, so I think there's something about being having the mindset to live in a rugged, strange environment, and to be part of a violent colonial project. It has to be said. Like I think it does us no good to shy away from the shared colonial history we have.
100%.
Uh, um, but but you know, I think that's why the music has connected there, and for us, we'll go wherever the music has connected with people. That's been the thing that for our band, I think, has both, been a pretty important calling card in terms of like the live show is something that we kind of hang our hats on. And yeah, but why are you, I think more than that, like, why would you do this if you didn't want to see how strange, and wacky and beautiful and fun it could get?
Perfect. Yeah, that's a perfect answer, really. And I definitely also see that sort of the similarities between like Australians and Canadians. I mean, I am married to an American, but she herself is
As
always
am
just sort
I.
of yeah. There we go. We get something more in common. But I mean,
Yeah.
she's always sort of looking at Canada and just sort of almost wistfully, sort of being like, oh, that could have been me. um, but sadly, she has to do with being American. But we're
But
slowly getting by.
you're in Melbourne, right? So
I'm in Melbourne. Yeah.
that's one of the great that is one of the great cities in the world, and that is something that I appreciate.
I mean,
No disrespect to other Australian locales, of course, but
oh, of
my
course.
goodness, what a city!
Yeah, well, I mean, so I'm originally from Adelaide, actually, and I mean, the
Okay.
music scene isn't quite as strong as it is in Melbourne, which is one of the reasons I moved to Melbourne. But I mean, we definitely get a lot more sort of touring acts like PUP coming this way, and we have such more like greater exposure to all these acts as well, and you can just see why Melbourne turns into this great sort of music city as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess this isn't a whole, tourism campaign for Australia. This is a podcast, and I guess I should go down to the portion of the podcast from which its namesake is derived. So this whole trusty chords gambit sees me follow the 1, 3, and 5 structure of standard chord. So I ask about one artist that's been impactful, 3 albums that have been influential, and 5 songs you can turn to. these albums and songs don't need to be by your one artist, but you did also mention Wilco before. So I guess is Wilco the one artist that you would choose as the artist who's inspired you the most?
I would say they're definitely up there. I mean, uh, yeah, I, I saw Wilco with Zach, the drummer from PUP, when we were both like teenagers, and it was the first tour that Nels Cline was on, and I think Nels Cline has been sort of a consistent source of inspiration to my own guitar playing and to my own sort of um, ability to unlock kind of my love of jazz and sort of like avant-garde improvised music, like music, like music that makes Sonic Youth sound like pop music.
Oh yeah.
Um, I really do like love that stuff, and it's very niche music. But seeing how someone like Nels Cline was able to bring a lot of that sensibility, that sort of like kind of like television, uh, noise rock, experimental thing to a band like Wilco that is so rooted in this like uh, reverence for like Americana and folk songwriting, um, and good songs. That's like that to me is just is an endless wealth of creativity to draw from.
I mean, it's always also great to have those musicians who make you strive to be a better musician as well. Like I can imagine for you, Nels Cline is that sort of person who you're sort of like, oh, this is this is insane to me. Because I mean, I think by the time he joined Wilco, he'd been in the music game for like almost 3 decades by that point. And you just
Yeah,
think to have someone of that sort of caliber join a band like that, like Wilco just becomes so much stronger, and Nels Cline's like a profile just rises as well. And
yeah.
I feel like I'm rambling now, but you get the idea. Yeah.
No, no, totally. I think that's right. Like, it's kind of one of those like, uh, it's almost hard to envision them. Like I know that arguably their most famous record has no Nels Cline on it whatsoever.
Mm.
Right? Like,
Still, yeah.
yeah, and he does really cool things live on some of those songs from Yankee Hotel Foxtrot. But like, yeah, it almost feels impossible to think of that band without him in it, which is a testament, I think, to how perfect that kind of pairing and that match is.
And I guess my next question here is, what are 3 albums that have impacted you the most? This could be albums you're always throwing on, or things that were integral to your musical evolution.
Yeah, those ones are geez, you
It's
could have
it's
all
a tough
kinds of
one. I'm
different
sorry.
ones. It is no, it's fine. I'm gonna take this is just off the dome. Uh, uh, Kind of Blue by Miles Davis. Feels like an obvious one, but it is true. It was my introduction to jazz in a lot of ways and changed the course of my life. It's what made me want to learn how to play jazz, albeit not very well. Uh,
There's still time.
and yeah, right. Uh, and it sent me to music school, and still to this day, I can sing some of those solos.
There are certainly worse ways to be introduced to jazz as well. I mean, that's a stellar
Yes,
record, and
absolutely.
Miles is the
It is
king.
absolutely. He is the king. Um, I'm gonna take. I probably should take Sky Blue Sky by Wilco,
Mhm.
uh, a record that I've talked about a little more in depth actually on our Substack, which people can check out if they want. Um, and I'm going to take one that I just thought of that I every time I listen to it I love it. Is Ray Charles and Modern Sounds in Country and Western Music. Are you familiar with that record?
I don't know if I actually know that one specifically. I mean, I've listened to a lot of Ray Charles' work, but I mean, off the top of my head, I can't place what's on that record. Like, well, was there
Um,
any particular big takeaways from the album?
I, I love that he does interpretations of like Hank Williams and like all these kind of country artists. I grew up loving a lot of music, obviously punk. I didn't really pick a punk record, which kind of feels crazy, but whatever. Who cares? That's the most punk thing you can do. Uh, um, Uh, but I loved country music growing up. That's another probably speaking to just early memories watching the Grand Ole Opry
Mm.
with my grandmother. But so hearing them kind of put into that sort of bluesy, almost like funky R&B um, context. Um, Again, I think what I'm realizing more and more about myself and the music that I love is um, things that are put into an unexpected context. That's where you really learn about how strong a piece of music is to me. Like, because a great song or a great melody or, an interesting concept is applicable in genres or scenarios or iterations that are unexpected, and it works, right? Singing a Hank Williams tune with a R&B backing band led by arguably one of the best blues musicians, R&B musicians to ever walk the planet in Ray Charles.
Mm.
That's to me that kind of stuff is fascinating.
Absolutely. Actually, I was just looking at the album as well, just to make sure I was familiar with it. I believe that most listeners could probably be aware of the lead single, which was "I Can't Stop Loving You," which is probably how
Yeah,
I think most people could know it.
yeah.
Also, actually, just fascinating as you were sort of mentioning about sort of like this different context and everything. I think it was actually only yesterday, and it's fitting you mentioned Miles Davis. I came across Miles Davis's cover of "Time After Time" by Cyndi Lauper,
Oh, sure. From the
and
80s, yeah, from
yeah,
that 80s record Marcus Miller played bass on that record. Yeah.
yes, yes, but it's that's one of those things where like listening to it, if you weren't aware it's Miles Davis, like the two things almost feel very anachronistic. That they sort of feel like they're from different time periods almost, and you're sort of
Yeah.
like, oh, I like to imagine Miles Davis actually performing this sort of thing, which is this piece of music, which is so poppy, and I mean it's admittedly one of her somewhat sadder songs, but it doesn't feel right. It feels a little bit incongruous. But then to actually hear it and you're just thinking, well, it's in the right hands. Someone like Miles Davis, he's going to turn it into something amazing.
And it's fascinating, right? Like the history of jazz music is more in line with Miles playing a song like that in the 1980s
Mhm.
than I think the sort of like academicization of jazz has led us to believe.
Yeah,
It's kind of a mouthful, but like uh, a lot of those songs were pop songs at the time, right? Like all like the Surrey with the Fringe on Top, or like all these kind of like classic jazz tunes. My favorite things, right? Like there's a perfect
yeah,
example. My favorite things is from The Sound of Music. It is not the John Coltrane vehicle for like extended freak out improvisation that we think of. Like that context completely changes. I don't know. There's something about it that's fascinating to me. I guess my point
absolutely.
is like this is why I like hearing the guitar player Bill Frisell is another one of those guys who does that stuff really well. I love Bill Frisell. He's one of my favorites of all time. Uh, but he'll turn around and cover I Heard It Through the Grapevine by Marvin Gaye.
Yes.
And it's this kind of like ethereal, ambient, sort of Americana, sort of jazz, sort of noise. Like, yeah, I don't know that stuff to me is finding ways to give new context to things is kind of it's a moving target that I have fun launching sonic projectiles at, to keep the metaphor going.
Mm. No, I understand exactly where you're coming from, and I'm right there with you. And I also sadly think the rest of the day I'm probably going to have Surrey with the Fringe on Top stuck in my head again. That always gets stuck in my head so
Yeah.
constantly. But I guess lastly, I'd love to know the five songs you can always turn to, whether it be for comfort, for excitement, anything at all. Your five trusty songs.
Sure. Well, since we're speaking about Bill Frisell, one of my favorites. I play it all the time, sometimes to warm up. Sometimes I just go back and listen. Bill Frisell has a tune called "Go Jake,"
Mm,
which is off of a record he made in Nashville called Nashville. He made it in 1997.
yes.
I love that one. Um, I love the hymn "Amazing Grace." I think it's one of the most incredible ballads ever written. I think it's one of the most beautiful. Yeah.
It's definitely one of those pieces of work which is very I guess overlooked because of its sort of style and its I guess just how it sort of becomes so ingrained within popular culture and everything, where it like people don't really pay attention to it. They sort of view it as a bit of
Yeah.
wallpaper music in a sense. And it's like
Yes.
when you
Yeah.
start
Yeah. Yeah.
looking at it, you're like, actually, you know what? There is actually a lot of quality in this.
Oh yeah. It's beautiful. It's such a beautiful melody. That's two, huh? Okay. I love. Uh. Oh my God. What's the song? It's Neil Young. It's from. My God. Why can't I think of the name? Somewhere on a desert highway.
Oh
Uh,
yes.
Desert Highway? It's from
Is it Unknown Legend?
uh Unknown Legend. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that is like the whenever the weather finally changes from winter, when it feels like it's really the first beautiful day of the spring is here, we're approaching that. I know with the seasons are inverted and you guys are approaching the end of the nice weather, but um that's like a song where you roll the windows down in the car and you just go drive. It doesn't matter where you go. It's beautiful outside. You can wear a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Unknown Legend by Neil Young. Uh, uh, oh man.
It's a tough question, isn't it?
I can just keep naming like Canadian folk music.
I mean, and by all
uh,
means, if you need any honorable mentions in there as well, it's my podcast. I make the rules, so feel free to say whatever you like.
I would add River by Joni Mitchell, probably.
Oh yes,
That one's self-explanatory, I think.
of course, absolute
Uh,
legend of music.
uh, yeah. This is not really like songs per se. I was gonna say it's not really music, but of course it is. It's staggeringly musical. Um, but something that I always go back to in moments when I need to kind of meditate or zone out, like on a flight to Australia, for example. Uh, the Disintegration Loops by William Basinski.
Oh yes, that's a
Uh,
wonderful piece of work.
yeah, I just find something new in that somehow every time I listen to it.
Hmm.
Um, even though it's, you know, just one great idea followed through to its logical conclusion.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a wonderful piece of work, and definitely something that is very. It can become very meditative, or it can become a little bit existential, depending how you
Yeah.
sort of
Oh,
look at it.
there are times I've like listened to it and just wept. Like uh uh is that four? Did I give you four?
I think that's actually five.
There's
But
five. Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
but I mean, by all means, if you had any any honorable mentions, feel free. But actually, just as you're mentioning disintegration loops, I've been noticing a lot lately that there's been a lot of comparisons made to. I think it was an album by The Caretaker, "Everywhere at the End of Time," which is this
Okay.
I think it's like six albums or something like that, where it's an album that the idea is it's supposed to portray Alzheimer's disease. So it sort of starts out with
Oh,
like a lot of
interesting.
sort of like starts out with like a lot of sort of like almost like ballroom music, and then it becomes like slowly disintegrated to the point where it basically is supposed to sort of represent a mind that's been stripped of its like of its
And what
consciousness.
is it? What
It's
is it called?
called "Everywhere at the End of Time" by The
Oh yeah,
Caretaker.
here it is, 2019. I'm looking it up as you tell me here. Oh, great. I will have a listen to this. Thank you very much.
It's one of those things. I mean, it goes for about like 6.5 hours in total. But
Hmm.
like if you have a long flight, by the end of it,
Oh yeah.
you'll almost be thinking, wow, it's a terrifying existence that I'm sort of living in. When you just see how it disintegrates over time. But
Yeah, I am this is fascinating. Thank you. Thank you very much.
no, but by all means, it's truly a fascinating listen. But yeah, well, hopefully, if you listen to that on the way to Australia, hopefully you'll actually still be feeling happy enough to actually play and have a good tour.
Oh yeah, I'm I again as much as it is I think useful to not turn away and to face uncomfortable truth. It is always exciting to be somewhere to play songs for people, especially when it's so far away from home.
Of course. Well, I feel like that's a good way for me to end by saying, Steve Sladkowski, I want to say thank you so very much for your time today and for being part of the Trusty Chords podcast.
Thank you for having me. It was a blast. I can't wait to listen to that recommendation.
Thank you for listening to Trusty Chords. If you listened to this episode and enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate it if you were able to take a few moments to like, follow, share, and review this podcast on your preferred platform of choice. As always, no obligation, but I'm forever grateful if you do. And as always, I'm over on Instagram and Facebook at Trusty Chords Podcast, all one word. I've also got a blog on my website, which is tylerjenke.com. That's tylerjenke/Trusty Chords Podcast, all one word. Over on the site, you'll find a blog that also has all of the selections chosen by my guest each week, and you'll also be able to find a link to the Buy Me a Coffee platform where you can throw me a few dollars to keep this podcast running if you feel so inclined. Lastly, I need to thank Steve Sladkowski for joining me this week, and also need to thank Amy from Death Proof PR for organising the chat as well. But once again, thank you kindly for listening, and I hope to see you all again next week as I continue to celebrate music and those that create it.